Overview. In this lesson, you will learn about direct and indirect speech. How do we tell others what people say or think? It is like giving a report on what happened, what was said, and what was thought. The kinds of words we use to give this information to others help them understand what happened easily. We use direct and indirect speech in order to give this information. In lessons 5 and 6, you will learn the characteristics of direct and indirect speech. You will also learn how to make out the differences between them as well as how to change one form into the other. Let us begin with direct speech. Saying exactly what someone has said is called direct speech. It is also called quoted speech because we quote the exact words spoken by someone. Sandhya said, "I love playing basketball." Note how, when we want to repeat the exact words used by somebody, we put them between inverted commas, which are also known as quotation marks. The contents inside the inverted commas are known as direct speech. When we use direct speech, we need to place the exact words that have been spoken within quotation marks. Take a look at this example. My mother said, "Rita, come and eat your dinner." Look at the quotation marks in this sentence. What is the first word that is spoken by my mother? Yes, it is Rita. Note how the quotation marks surround the words spoken by my mother. So, what do we know about direct speech? When we want to repeat the exact words used by somebody, we put them between inverted commas, which are also known as quotation marks. The contents inside the inverted commas are known as direct speech. When we write, we need to be careful about punctuation so that our readers can easily understand our meaning. Let us now look at some basic rules of punctuation that we need to follow when writing direct speech. The first thing we need to know is who spoke. When we tell our readers who spoke, we do it by using a reporting clause. So, what is a clause? A clause is a group of words. A reporting clause is a group of words that has a verb in it. For example, he said. Here, said is the verb in the clause. She asked. Here, asked is the verb in this clause. Now that we can identify the reporting clause, let us look at some rules we need to follow when writing direct speech. Rule 1. Direct speech begins and ends with quotation marks. They can be either a set of single quotation marks like this, or a set of double quotation marks like this. Rule 2. Direct speech begins with a capital letter. For example,
she said, "Let us begin our work."
he said, do it now. Rule 3. If the reporting clause is at the beginning, put a comma after the reporting clause just before the initial quotation marks. For example, he said, I'll finish it soon.
They said, "Don't take it lightly."
Rule 4. Instead of the comma, it is also possible to use the colon, especially if the direct speech has more than one sentence or if the sentence is rather long. For example, Mamta said, the children will have a lot of fun on the beach. The only trouble is that we can't rely on the weather at this time of the year, but we'll have to take a chance on it. Note where the colon comes, right after the word said. It comes before the opening quotation marks.
The correspondent reports, "The strike in the paper mill has entered the third day today. No agreement is yet in sight, and the workers refuse to move away from the gate."
Rule 5. If the quotation or direct speech ends the sentence, put a full stop, a question mark, an exclamation mark, or a dash or dots before the final quotation marks. For example, they said, we told you so.
He asked, "What did she say to you?"
He yelled, watch out!
She said, "I have worked all day today, yet I have not completed my project."
Rule 6. When the reporting clause is placed after a direct speech that would normally end with a full stop, a comma is placed instead of the full stop just before the end quotation marks. As a result, the reporting clause begins with a small letter. For example, I expect you to be there on time, he said.
"Be careful while crossing the road," warned Mom.
Don't let the dog out, my father said. Rule 7. If the direct speech is a question or an exclamation, use the appropriate punctuation mark before the final quotation marks. For example, "Who wrote on my paper?" he asked.
Get out, he yelled.
Rule 8. If the reporting clause is placed between two separate sentences in direct speech, then a full stop follows the reporting clause. The second sentence begins with a capital letter and ends with the appropriate punctuation before the end quotation marks. For example, "We told you so," they said, "but you wouldn't listen to us."
What did she give you? He asked. Show me what she gave you.
"Get lost," he yelled. "Leave me alone." Rule 9. If the reporting clause interrupts a single sentence, a comma is used even though normally the sentence would not be punctuated. The second half of the interrupted direct speech begins with a small letter. For example, "We warned you several times." Let's look at this sentence. "We warned you several times." This sentence was spoken by the boy's parents. When we wrote the sentence, we interrupted the speech with the reporting clause, "His parents said." Note how the comma is placed before the reporting phrase. Also note how the word several begins with a small letter. Take a look at how this sentence was written. Unlike direct speech, indirect speech doesn't use quotation marks to enclose what the person said. It also doesn't have to be word for word. In other words, even though the exact meaning of what has been spoken is given, the words are not exactly the same words that are spoken by the speaker. The inverted commas or quotation marks are removed and the conjunction that is used. Let's take a look at some examples. He said that he was going to meet his friend. Note the word that.
She said that she had seen the movie. Note the word that.
Pankaj asserted that he had seen the man somewhere.
Sudha said that she could not go to the temple with her.
Indirect speech is also known as reported speech. When reporting speech, the tense usually changes. This is because when we use reported speech, we are usually talking about a time in the past. Why is that? It is because the person who originally spoke did so in the past. The verbs, therefore, usually have to be in the past too. Let's take a look at how we can present the same idea in both kinds of speech. Pay close attention to the way the meaning of the two sentences remain the same even though one is in direct speech while the other is in indirect speech.
I am going to the movies, he said.
Think about this. Is this direct speech or indirect speech? If you said direct speech, you are absolutely correct. You probably saw the quotation marks, didn't you? Now look at the indirect version of this speech.
He said that he was going to the movies.
Did you notice how the verb within the quotation marks changed from the present tense to the past tense? Look at the next sentence.
I am working very hard, she said.
This sentence shows direct speech. Now let's see how this sentence changes when we make it into indirect speech.
She said that she was working very hard.
Let's recap what you have learned in today's lesson. In this lesson, you have learned the characteristics of direct and indirect speech. You should now be able to listen to the spoken language as well as read written language and distinguish between the two forms of speech. You must remember, direct speech is also known as quoted speech. Direct speech tells us the exact words spoken by a person. The exact words spoken by the person are placed within quotation marks. You may now use this time to read the reference reading material that goes with this lesson. Thank you.